into Port Angeles in 1972. Okay, go ahead and say in 1972. Sorry.
Well, in 1966, I went to work for the post office, and I thought I was getting such wonderful wages that I thought, man, this is great. And it was something I always wanted to do. Even when I was a little kid, I'd play with Mama's mail, junk mail and stuff, and put it in little pouches and have sort it and everything. And when I started to go to work, when I got the job in the post office, I went and talked to Marion Mansfield, who had just retired as postmaster, and I said, always before when I've got a job, I've had some idea what I was going to be doing. I have absolutely no idea what goes on back there. And she said, well, you'll probably be sorting mail to go out and probably tying out batches of letters, and you'll probably be boxing mail, and the boxes are in order, and so you just read the box number and put it in the boxes, and that's probably what you'll be doing, and that's what I was doing. But in the 60s, Kenneth got hurt in the woods and had 3 back surgeries. And finally in 1972, the doctor told him he couldn't work anymore. So I had to have full-time work, and I wasn't getting only part-time work in Forks. And so I came in and talked to Dorothy Thorpe and talked about a transfer to Port Angeles, and this was on a Wednesday. It was on a Tuesday. And Dorothy interviewed me for about a half an hour, and she said, Alberta, I want you, and I'm going to pull every string I can get to get you. 6:30 on a Saturday morning, I went to work in Port Angeles. From Tuesday till Saturday. And he didn't bother to tell me till Friday morning, when I was going to the post office in La Push to fill in for the postmaster. And so I had overnight to think about moving to Port Angeles. We brought our little travel trailer in here and parked it down in the city mobile home park, down behind what was then the library. And I lived in a travel trailer. I worked a split shift. The library was between me and the post office, so I read a lot of books. I'd go to bed and read because it was cold in the trailer. It was I think I moved in here in September maybe. I'm not sure just when I moved in here, but anyhow, then Kenneth got sick and I couldn't take him to the travel trailer. And so I rented an apartment at the Uptown Motel, and I loved it. I had maid service, I had clean linens, clean towels. All I had to do was put them out on the deck and they would replace them. And Kenneth hated it. He wore out decks of cards, playing solitary because he hated television. And it was so different working in Port Angeles because, for one thing, the postmaster liked me. And that helps when your boss likes you. And I thought, I was so happy when I turned in my till in Forks because I was only like $1 short and I had to pay it out of my pocket. And I turned in my $800 till and was so happy, and I wasn't in Port Angeles a week until I had a $15,000 till, which I was responsible for every penny. And so then in the next spring, we bought a house on 15th and A and lived there for a few years, and then we moved out to Dungeness. And when that got too much for Kenneth, because he thought he had to farm all the land around there, and it got too much for him, so we sold it and moved back to town. And I was driving 17 miles each way to work, 5 days a week. And then we'd usually come to town on Saturday to shop, and then we tried churches out in Sequim, Dungeness, went home. So we drove to Port Angeles on Sundays to go to church. So I actually drove 7 days a week from Dungeness. Loved it out there, but we finally moved back to town. And then I retired, and we traveled for 3 years in our motorhome.
Okay, cool. That was good stuff.
And then I went to work. Well, first I went to work for First Federal. Worked there till I got the job at the mini storage out here in east of town. That's gone now. And then we went around the United States and came back, and when we were up in Medicine Hat, I got a call from Carolyn that the Ericksons wanted to talk to me. So I called them, and they said, we want you to come down and run our new one in Salem, Oregon. So we went down there for a year and a half. And I was happy to get back to my mountains, back to Port Angeles. So we bought on Deer Park, and then after Kenneth died, the place was too big for me, and so I bought in town. And I've been here ever since, except for the 2 years I lived with Carolyn. That's about it.
Cool. Now, trying to think of a couple more historical things we can talk about.
Okay.
So during the late 70s was Jimmy Carter, and it was kind of crappy under Jimmy Carter.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any remembrances of crappy things?
I remember him, he was scared of that rabbit. He was out in a rowboat and he said a rabbit was chasing him. Jimmy Carter.
Yeah. And then in 1980, Ronald Reagan was elected president, and that kind of got better.
I was not for Ronald Reagan.
Okay, so say the whole thing over again.
Okay. When Ronald Reagan was elected, I was not for Ronald Reagan. I thought he was an actor and couldn't run the country. And I got a big surprise because he's been one of our best presidents. And that's when I became a Republican. You can take that out too.
No, that's fine. I don't mind. So, follow the Soviet Union. So Gorbachev, Ronald Reagan, bring that wall down, stuff like that. So talk something about, if you remember anything about the fall of the Soviet Union, or maybe the red fears that you might have had in the past, like the hiding under the table and then maybe talk about the fall of the Soviet Union and or the Berlin Wall coming down.
Another thing about during the time of the communists, when we were living in Corvallis, and we were picking hops. If anybody's ever picked hops, it's not a fun job. It's dirty, and your hands are sticky from the juice on the hops, and you're hot and tired, and the sun. You have to wear a straw hat and overalls and everything, and there were some guys come in the hop yards preaching communism, and they were run out of the hop yards. People ganged up, and they just run those guys out of there fast because we wanted no communism in the United States. And then when they thought that Hollywood was all communist, during the McCarthy era, that was terrible because we knew those people were not communists. McCarthy was just out to prove a point and make a name for himself, I'm sure. Anyhow.
Do you remember when the USSR fell apart? Do you remember anything about that?
No, but everybody was happy when the USSR fell apart. Actually, what was his name? The one man that wasn't as bad as all the rest of them.
Gorbachev? He was the one that had the birthmark on his forehead?
Was that Gorbachev?
Yeah.
Well, he seemed to be trying to do something different with Russia. And he didn't seem as bad as the others, but...
Can you say that again, saying... Because I was the one who said Gorbachev. Can you say it when you say Gorbachev?
I think Gorbachev was not as bad as some of the others, although he had to be pretty bad to get to the head of the Russian government. But he seemed to be trying to do something with Russia that was a little better than what Lenin and Khrushchev and all of those did. And of course now it's pretty bad with Putin. He thinks he's a little emperor.
Do you remember anything about the Berlin Wall coming down? Your impressions, where you were, if you remember anything like that?
Well, remember, I was working full time.
Berlin Wall came down in 91? 92?
Oh, it did?
Yeah.
Well, then I was traveling.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah, because the Soviet Union fell in like 89, and then the Berlin Wall came down in like 91 or something like Okay.
I just remember it, but I don't remember too much about it.
Right. Okay. So, do you have any thoughts, remembrances about there was the Oklahoma City bombing happened in the 90s, and then there was also we had the Atlanta Olympics. I don't know if you remember.
Just remember the horror of it when it happened, because by that time we had television and saw everything.
Can you said it? Can you say I remember when?
Oh.
Oklahoma City.
Oklahoma City bombing, how horrible it was, because we had television then and we could see everything that happened. And that's one thing, bad thing about television. You know, everything was going on all over the world, and so it's not like the innocent times when we didn't have anything but radio. And we would listen to the news at noon, and then in the evening we'd listen to the news, and then the programs that were on in the evening, and that was about what we did for. We played lots of games, which we still do.
Do you remember when you got your first computer? Or first calculators? First major...
The first calculator I ever had, I paid for a Texas Instrument that didn't even have a printer. I paid $130 for it. And now they give them away.
Do you remember color TV or a printer, word processor, computer, anything like that?
No, I just remember I just got out of the post office before the computer could put computers in. Just made it out in time before I had to learn to do that. We did everything with our adding machines and our pencils and our pens and our heads. Now they put the packages on a scale, and the scale tells them what to charge. We had to weigh them and compute it ourselves.
I remember you guys having a Nintendo.
Oh, I love to play Nintendo. And I have one, but Kenneth won't hook it up.
What was your favorite game?
I liked most everything I had. Tetris and the little guy. What was his name? Mario. But I could never get through the dungeon. I always fell in the pit in the dungeon. I never did make it through to rescue the princess. It was fun. And when I was at the mini storage in Salem, between customers, I had to be in the office. And what else could I do? I played Nintendo.
I remember you guys having Dr. Mario tournaments. Like you and my mom and Brian, maybe. I remember you guys and Carolyn all sitting out in that back room out on Deer Park and playing Dr. Mario. It was in...
Really?
Yeah, it was in Brian's room. I remember you guys... Not the second Deer Park house, not the first Deer Park house.
I remember it.
Oh, I do.
I have a better memory for my childhood than I do for my things that happened later in my life.
Yeah.
In fact, a lot of people have said, you can remember all that from your childhood. I remember stuff that happened when I was 3 years old. And they put me in the first grade when I was 4, and put me in the 3rd grade when I was 5. And that was fine till I got in high school, and I was totally at sea. I was out of my age group. I was not mature enough to want to get good grades. I finished in 4 years, but...
So... Oh, Mount St. Helens.
Well, when it blew,
Say,
when Mount St. Helens blew, we were getting ready to go to Canada. We were loading our motorhome. And my brother and sister-in-law from Iowa were there. And the neighbor stopped, and Kenneth was out talking to him. And Guy went out there, my brother, and Mina was out on the porch, and I was in the house. And when Kenneth came in, I said, what did Don want? And he said, oh, we heard some explosions, and he asked us if it was Mount St. Helens blew or whether the Russians were bombing us. And we thought nothing about it more than that. And Kenneth heard 3 distinct explosions. Might have been some echoes. But, so we went to Canada and we were up there about 3 days, and somebody saw our license plate and said, "Oh, were you anywhere near that mountain that blew?" So we immediately went and got the newspapers and started reading about the mountain that blew.
Cool.
There's nothing like sitting on a stump by a campfire on a mountain lake in Canada. That's a dream.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's raining, no matter what. We had some real good times up there. Anytime we took a vacation, we headed for Canada.
What was it about Canada?
It was empty and wild and free, and the people were nice, and it just was different. We were in another country. And the first time I saw Lake Louise, I was so thrilled because my middle name was Louise, and it was in Alberta, and I thought, this is the height of any ambitions, is to see the lake was named my name. It was beautiful. Carolyn and I went up there one time and stayed in the Chateau Lake Louise. And she said, "Shall we stay? It's awfully expensive." And I said, "It's once in a lifetime. Let's stay overnight." So we did. And when I got the bill, it was about half what the price was because of the exchange. They put it on I put it on my credit card, and they gave me the exchange, and it was about half what. I think it was $160 for that night, and that included a big breakfast, huge breakfast. And talk about getting waited on. They meet you at the car, they take your luggage. When you get to your room, your luggage is there. Everything is just so neat. That's like the rich live. Waited on hand and foot. That's pretty fun.
Okay. So I don't know if we probably don't want to talk about Clinton and nah, that's kind of boring. Want to talk about 9/11 at all? Is that important?
Oh, it was very important. 9/11 was very important, but I don't remember anything except about the horror of it.
Yeah.
Like I said, with television, I actually saw the plane hit the towers on television. I happened to have the news on. And I knew it was not an accident. 747 doesn't fly into a tower. They don't go that low. And when they said, "Oh, there's been an accident, terrible plane crash, an accident," and then when I saw the second one fly into